I don't look like what people expect folks that work in death to look like. They want cropped black hair and maybe like a blunt bang, very pale, who wears black all the time. Leaving the practice of law, though, was challenging. I was the only lawyer I'd ever known who'd taken a medical leave of absence for mental health. During that time, I went to Cuba, where I met a fellow traveler who had uterine cancer. And then I started asking her about her death. And then I thought, well, this is juicy. Why are we not talking about this all the time? I talk often about imagining our ideal deathbed, and I think a lot about my own deathbed. When I allow myself to imagine what it can be, it allows me to see very clearly what my value system is. And so I think I look a little differently than people expect somebody talking about death all the time to look. But then when they actually pay attention to it, this is it. Like, live.
You look incredible.
Thank you. It's a multi-layered lip for you.
Oh my gosh. So we finally had a chance to do this.
Finally, at long, long last.
Congratulations so much on your book, Briefly, Perfectly Human. And I've been watching the whole thing, and I feel how radiant that is and how exciting that is and how many lives that you're touching. How are you feeling?
Today I feel hopeful. Today I feel inspired. Today I feel elastic. I feel like there's a lot of potential for things to go in different ways that feels good and inspiring and not terrifying, because sometimes that's also really scary. So today I feel pretty good.
So when you say you feel more elastic, what do you mean by that?
I mean, I'm not so mired in how I'm supposed to feel. I'm used to a very, very rich emotional life, but also when I feel something, then that becomes the story, as opposed to not allowing it to be the story, but just to let it be the moment, so that the next moment can have another story if it wants to. So to allow myself to like toggle between them and to laugh and then to cry and then to be laughing again in my crying, as opposed to how I want it to be, how I feel like I need it to be, how other people need it to be, how people need me to be. It's so much more freeing. And being in relationship with my death consistently sends me right back there.
Right. Well,
all the time.
Yeah, I want to totally obviously get into all of that. So just before we move on for a second, tell me a little bit about what your style says about you today, right now.
Oh, today I wanted a little zhuzh for myself. I also knew I was going to be talking to you. And so I put on the fun sleeves because I needed a little pick-me-up in the elasticity that I've been feeling. I'm like, let's stretch it all the way. Let's go into those places. And some of those places is my fabulousness, which I don't deny myself. It's just sometimes when I'm in the midst of grief or uncertainty, it might be one of the things that I lean away from, whereas I find that leaning into it is something that actually brings me a lot of life. It's very generative in a way.
Have you always been free, felt free in your self-expression?
I was free up until like 13, 14, 15 when you start to get really self-conscious. But for me, like clothes have always been freedom. My style has always felt like expression. I got to feel on the outside how I feel on the inside. And if I'm not liking how I feel on the inside, I change how I look on the outside, and then it can support how I'm feeling. Feels pretty straightforward to me, but I realize not everybody feels the same way.
Yeah. Part of being human is your outer expression. It's as much a part of your humanity as everything else. And I've always been like in awe, like when your TED Talk, everything, I was like, who is that? Based on what you're wearing. It is really, it matters. It means something because it drew me right in. And then, then I found like a wealth.
I will receive that because we worked really hard on that outfit. Okay. I was up until until the moment my plane left, I was like, I need this to come together because I think that humans receive noble truths, or they're softened to receive noble truths through a few mediums. Beauty is certainly one. When I'm standing up there talking about how we die, things that could be really confronting anyway, well, let me look good so that it can land a little easier.
I can't even imagine what you must confront being the leader right now, or among the leaders of this movement, to be confronting death and talking about death, like how people must respond. Does anything stand out in your mind?
Well, I don't look like what people expect folks that work in death to look like. I hear all the time. I think that they want cropped black hair and maybe like a blunt bang. Well, they definitely want a white person, maybe very pale, who wears black all the time, maybe like a red lip when she's getting fancy. And I care about how I look. Not that they don't care, but I care deeply, and I like to express, and I like color, and I want the life in it as well. You know, I'm living all the way up until the time that I die, and I'm going to live in this body. I'm going to decorate this body, and my clothing is part of that. And to me, it's a part of the message.
Exactly.
And so I think I look a little differently than people expect somebody talking about death all the time to look, but I think I also approach life in a different way than people expect people that are involved in death care to look. But then when they actually pay attention to it, this is it. Like, live. Let's be here. Let me fill out my body, fill out my life. Let me express myself, because one day I won't have the opportunity to. So while I'm here, man, I'm going to do it.
It's part of being present.
Yeah.
Your full on expression and how far you can go with it, and why would you want to conform, and why would you want to be like anyone else, is all part of being alive.
Yeah. All of it. And that's what we're honoring when somebody's dying. You know, that's what I'm paying attention to. The end of a singular expression of humanhood. What a miracle that human was. No matter what they contributed or how much money they made or the impact they had on others, the fact that they lived in and of itself is more than enough for me to celebrate.
Right. And that's why it's more than enough. And we are more than enough that we're here.
Yeah.
When you say being more in touch with your death in terms of this moment and how you're feeling, do you find that being in touch with your death helps you to, no matter how bad it gets? Like, we're looking at so much. To me, I feel like we're looking at the depths of our shadows right now. And I'm optimistic because of that, because I feel like healing entails one to confront their shadows internally. I think it's mirrored externally in the world. And so how are we going to get there unless we can see what we've actually created? All of us, like everybody, because we create everything.
Together.
And we've created kind of a lot of problems. So, yeah, so I'm wondering if, do you find that being in touch with death is the antidote?
To a lot of things. I think to a lot of the fear and the anxiety, even though it's entirely counterintuitive, because some people hold so much fear and anxiety in their dying. But when I am placing myself at my death and I'm looking at my current life, it allows me to really be elastic, to understand that this is but a moment in the larger picture, that I've survived all of it thus far, that the catastrophe will come when it's time for it to come, if it comes at all. It also allows me to ground in like my body and my life itself and my love and the excellent sourdough toast I had this morning. The butter was melted just right through it all. Like all that, my death also allows me to like be with the juiciness of my life for what it is in the midst of a storm.
I was literally saying today, embrace the chaos, embrace the chaos. And that's what like calms my nervous system down. Like the idea that it's not supposed to be chaos is like, and where did we get that from?
Yeah. Who promised that to us? Nobody.
No. And that the moment is exactly the moment that it is supposed to be. It's tough. So I'm just like, I've been saying, embrace the chaos, like, this is being alive. We're alive. We're here.
Now, on top of that, when I am really present with my death, it allows me to like embrace the perfection in this moment for what it is. Part of the reason I titled the book briefly, Perfectly Human, was that there is no control version of me or my life or this world to compare to. This is the perfect expression of it. This is what happens. This is how it is. This is the perfect one. There's no me that weighs 10 pounds less or is living in a Kamala administration or has watched the government do things that feel good to me and my spirit and my sensibilities all along. There isn't. There's this version of my reality right now. Now, quantum physics says that there may be another, but I'm going to go with this one for now because it's the one that we're living in. This is it. This is the right one. Now it's up to me how I choose to navigate it once I become aware of it and I accept that reality of it.
And I think within that acceptance, which has been a tough one for me my whole life, because I've been like a fighter, a warrior, like, no, we got to make this better. We got to with childhood and with this or with that or whatever's happened. Where I'm coming to right now along the lines of what you're saying exactly is that somehow in that letting go and the acceptance of it, that's where you actually make the change.
Yes. I think it is a radical act to be with what is for what it is. Part of why I find death work to be activist at its core is because in order to honor the entire human life for what it was, I have to honor the human for who they were, all the ways that they were, despite the ones that I like or could get down with or the actions that they took that I'm down for, right? I honor the totality of the human, the totality of the life. That is radical in today's day and age, to allow a human to be human, to be flawed, to have different perspectives, to wear clothes that I don't like, or to speak in a manner that I don't appreciate, have views that don't jive with mine, to allow a human to be exactly who they are. Wow, we don't get that. Those spaces don't exist. That's radical. To me, it's an act of activism.
It's mind-blowing. Because how else are we going to get out of this mess? Pointing fingers, blaming, staying in hierarchical structures, thinking that power is something on the outside instead of on the inside, the same for everybody.
And also the denying of other people their power, right? That doesn't work either.
Well, that's only coming from the illusion that power, that we all don't have the same, which is an illusion, because obviously we all do internally, but I feel personally we're at the end of the dark ages of this idea that power is outside, that you have to grab, and that you feel you're not connected internally. When you're not connected internally, then you don't get what power is. You think it's something you have to grab from someone else.
Yeah, and it exists in somebody else. And then 3 steps further, that there is even another that exists that holds something that the experience of I can't hold.
We all have the same source and the same power, and that's why I love to have this kind of I want to call this a conversation and not an interview, because for the viewer, the whole point of our interviews is to empower people to be themselves and to understand how far they can go with that, and what that they're here to be huge.
Yeah, it's our birthright to be massive. It is my birthright. The dizzying amount of serendipity that had to occur for me to be born today, to reach adulthood, to have done all the things that I do in my life. Why would I ever play small? Why? How could I? It is my birthright to be as large as I want to be. My birthright is expression. My birthright is uniqueness. I'm not built like anybody, not meant for anybody. Here I am for me.
Exactly. Or why would we be here?
Yeah.
The actual act that we're here is so huge. How did we even get here? What are we even doing as part of this solar system and this universe that has 2 trillion galaxies? Like, it makes no sense that you would be small.
At all.
It's similar to death because it's quantum physics, right? I mean, birth and death is the only thing we know, right? Like obviously it's part of the rhythm. Why fight that rhythm? Like, what's the point of that?
Right. I mean, we can't win anyway. Yeah. We can't win anyway.
It is quantum physics.
It is, all of it. This actually takes me back to when we were talking earlier about not being able to control everything and wishing things that were different or better, or being in death work reminds me all the time that there is no fixing. There's no fixing like the pain of grief or loss. There's no fixing death. Like I can't make anybody's illness go away, no matter how much space I hold. I cannot work somebody out of their grief. And so it's actually been a real big, trial by fire, learning hard and fast that I must surrender to the state that I'm in, that another is in, and just allow them to be there.
What a teaching.
It's a wallop.
And by your doing that, I'm assuming it gives them validation to just be where they are.
Right. When I'm not trying to make it better for them, because I can't. And so many of our attempts to make our fellow human feel better, particularly in the midst of grief, end up being really damaging and doesn't make them feel better. And in fact, makes them feel unheard or invalidated or like they're wrong for feeling sad. Or responding in grief, however they're responding in grief. And so my job constantly just reminds me to allow people, things, myself to be where we are when we are there. There's no fixing, in fact, just being with. also a radical act.
Right. And I think it's the same thing as just allowing the feelings to come up, not putting them down, because pushing them down and then living your life with triggers and reactivity and avoiding pain when pain is teaching you about yourself and helping you to understand yourself better instead of avoiding that. All of that shit is the stuff that has caused all the problems.
Yeah, I think so. That and also not honoring death, but I'm really biased.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I literally feel that you could trace back probably most of the ills of the society to an avoidance and a fear of death and not talking about it. To avoid, the only thing that we know that we're going to do, which is to age and to die, is toxic.
Yeah. It also leads to people believing in some power that they have over another, which is not true. I don't think that societies that revere death can also hold any of the systems that keep us disconnected from one another. It's impossible to me.
Why is that?
Well, because in order to honor and to revere death, I have to honor the totality of the unique lived experience for each individual. So when I'm honoring somebody in their death, I'm honoring their life. When I'm honoring their life, I'm honoring all the things that they were. I'm honoring also their grieving. I can't hold transphobia and honor death. I can't hold racism and honor death. I can't hold sexism. I can't hold colonialism. None of those things can exist in a system that also reveres and honors death and dying. No way. No way. We can't drop bombs on folks because in order to drop bombs on them, we have to deny their humanhood. We have to deny their individuality. We have to strip them of the things that make them human. And you can't do that when also honoring that they will die.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. That is profound. That is utterly essential for us to confront death and our humanity. I mean, it just ties you to your humanity. So what is a thing that you once felt shame around or didn't like about yourself or didn't want, that once you embraced it and you accepted it became a strength or a superpower?
My sensitivity, for sure. My vulnerability, my innate and unending capacity to weep out of sadness and grief, but also sometimes beauty and joy. And for the longest time, that sensitivity was something that wasn't celebrated, and I got made fun of for crying. You know how in like families, it's like, oh, you know how she is. She's just like that. You know how she is. And in my family, the you know how she is she's probably crying about something. She's probably very emotional about something. She's feeling strongly about something. And it turns out it works very, very well in death care. Allowing my heart to be broken by how we die, how my brother-in-law died, how poorly we take care of each other in our most painful moments. That fueled me to start the business, to teach other death doulas. It is my superpower. If that feeling in me were ever numbed or dulled, I would be worried. Yeah, I'd be concerned. I want it to be vibrant. I want it to feel like a nerve ending. I want my heart to be broken by people, you know?
And what was your journey taking a turn away from this beauty and this gift and to then finding it?
Yeah. It's really what I wrote about in my book, but the long arc of the story is entering into the practice of law at 25 years old, working there for almost a decade in the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. So I was still doing work that, for all intents and purposes, was still noble and had a very feeling center. But the way that the justice system is and the practice of law in this country is not for me. We consistently, despite the vast amount of wealth in this country, deny the most marginalized and the most disenfranchised of us basic human rights and benefits. I kept trying to do the work. It required me to numb a bit to keep doing it because otherwise I was just in a horror all the time. It led to a clinical depression, a major depressive episode, and I took a medical leave of absence from work. And during that leave of absence is where I ultimately found death care in a place that allows my allows my heart to be broken, allows me to be in like the inky, dense, the thickness of what it means to be alive.
What's really fascinating is then you found a way to like let your spirit feel everything, and you became so powerful and so strong in what you're doing and actually aligned with you.
Yeah. And still getting to do justice work. I just get to do it where I feel so much more free to like be me, actually, to wear the puffy sleeves and to cry at the drop of a dime and to say white supremacy as often as I find it necessary. It helps.
Was it hard to take the step of leaving something that you maybe at the time thought, oh God, how can I leave this? Like I'm a lawyer, I've achieved this status and this level, and like to walk away. And then how did you find your way into where you are now?
I am smiling because you said like achieve this status. I never thought of it as that. I went to law school realistically because I just didn't know what else to do with myself. I knew that I wanted to impact the world and to create change. And my heart had been broken about HIV and AIDS before and was looking for a way into like policy or something. So being in the practice, I rarely called myself a lawyer. I often just said that I practiced law because I didn't hold it. I didn't personalize it. It didn't feel like an achievement of any real sort. It felt like I have $130,000 in student loans, which I still do, by the way. It felt like I'm just signing up for more. Leaving the practice of law, though, was challenging because it was how I crafted my life. I had spent 3 years in law school. I committed to all these loans. I built a practice. I built a life that didn't feel like mine. And depression, in retrospect, was another gift because I got too sick to continue going to work. I wasn't showering. I wasn't feeding myself well. I was just drinking a bottle of red wine and a pack of smokes a night, and I just was not engaging with life at all. At the time, I was the only lawyer I'd ever known who'd taken a medical leave of absence for mental health. I knew many that needed it, but I was the only one that did it. And during that time, I went to Cuba, where I met a fellow traveler on the bus who had uterine cancer. And we talked a lot about her life, and then I started asking her about her death. And then I thought, well, this is juicy. Why are we not talking about this all the time? Well, I guess I started talking about it all the time. 11 years later, here we are, still talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing to be able to not be afraid of things like depression and anxiety and fear and all these things that we all have, and to see them as your soul or your body speaking to you, and how you can alchemize it, you can change. There's something that needs to be changed within you. Like you're not like inherently broken.
Yeah, it was breaking open. It was like an agitator cycle, just like something's not working. And I'd been noticing that something wasn't working for a while. I just ignored it or tried to pretend like everything was fine. But then over time, it got impossible to ignore. And then when a medical doctor said to me, you are incapable of working anymore, I thought, I just need a little weekend. I need a getaway, maybe some more red wine, and I'll be fine. But I was not fine.
And then after you met the person with the uterine cancer, what happened?
We spent 14 hours together on the bus. I noticed that in our conversation, she was able to create shifts in her own life based on the fact that she would die. And I started to do that for myself personally, thinking, well, I don't want to be the same person on my deathbed, so what's got to change so that I reach there having lived a life that I actually wanted to live, a life that feels like me. I came back to the States and threw myself into the study of death across the board. And then my brother-in-law, my older sister's husband, Peter St. John, became ill. And I got to support him through the last 2 months of his life. And that's where I really learned the work of the doula and how necessary it is in society. And it was hard. It's still hard. I still feel pinchy when I think about the fact that Peter died. And yet it was being able to be present for him was a tremendous gift.
What was hard about it?
I adored him and he was dying. The medical care system, it felt like they didn't care. It was catastrophic in my life and our lives, But on some level, he was just another number. He was a disease process that was not responding to medicine. He wasn't just my brother-in-law. He wasn't the father of my niece. He may have been all those things theoretically, but in the way that they seemed to approach him, the care in which we received around his dying felt careless. It did not feel deeply honoring of our process and of his. I wanted a lot more ritual. I wanted a lot more answers. I wanted a lot more presence. I wanted their hearts to be broken too, damn it. This is a big deal. I want to feel like this matters to you too. Yeah, I wanted some guidance. I wanted somebody who was knowledgeable and compassionate and present and who could interpret some of the things the doctors were saying or would follow up, somebody who'd run the errands, and we didn't have that. So I built a business that does that for other people.
Wow. And how do you want to look back? Like how do you want to die? How do you want to be when you are at the end of your life?
Well, there's two things, right? Like I talk often about imagining our ideal deathbed and the use of it. And I think a lot about my own deathbed, knowing for damn sure that it's probably not going to happen that way, that I can meet my death in millions of ways. And yet, when I allow myself to imagine what it can be, it helps me to create a little bit of peace for myself around my dying and also allows me to see very clearly what my value system is. Kind of like in birth. It's like you make a birth plan. It's probably not going to go this way, but this is what you'd like. Like it helps you see what your preferences are and what your value system is. Okay. Mm-hmm. But it's also helpful to think about how I want to feel at the end of my life, which is really the root of the work. And how I want to feel is that I loved hard, that I was in my life, that I wasn't just like floating about and waiting for some other day when something would happen, but rather I allowed it to come as it was. I want to look back on my choices and maybe giggle at some of the more ridiculous ones I made, rather than this like self-beat up that I do sometimes. I want to feel like it was a really rich ride. That's how I want to feel at the end of my life.
I love all the layers of it. Like, I think about, how many times, people will just sort of say, and my heart sinks when I hear it. Like, if you ask how they are, they just go coping or being hard on yourself and, always trying to, like, somehow there's some perfect version of yourself. I mean, just all the layers of it are so beautiful in terms of just liberating yourself.
Thinking about how I want to feel how I die makes all that possible. Because if I notice that I don't feel that way now, well, what do I need to shift? If I'm afraid that I'm going to reach the end of my life not feeling like I love strongly, who do I need to say I love you to? Who do I need to gush over? Who needs to know how their presence in my life has changed me, has made me more full, has made me feel more alive, has made me feel beautiful and precious and smart, and the laughter. Like, who do I need to talk to express that? And since I'm still living, may as well do it now.
Right. It just opens your heart
wide.
And I think the amount of love that we have inside of ourselves is so infinite. It can heal and take care of anything, I believe. Love has literally healed me from nervous system dysregulation and anxiety and fear. And it literally has, like, the ultimate healing has been opening my heart.
And do you experience it in friendship and romantic relationship and children?
Everything.
And
it's changed everything in a similar way. I'm not necessarily thinking about my death, and I want to work on that. But it has been, I've been thrown to the ground and many times and had to pick myself back up again. And there was just nowhere to go but release and let go of everything that I was carrying and the negativity and the lower vibrational blame, shame, negativity, the waste of time and all those things. Being someone on the verge of a nervous breakdown, that's only gotten me so far.
This is true. That's funny. That's very funny and very true. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in the long term. It's not a long-term plan, not a long-term strategy.
It's not giving me the ultimate infinite power that I have inside of myself to really be of service.
It sure isn't. No. Instead, you're trying to figure out how to hold it together for one more minute.
Yeah, exactly. So when is the last time Well, I kind of want to say, when's the last time you cried, or what was the biggest cry you've had? Maybe both?
I cried this morning. I was talking to my cousin. She's in Ghana, and she's been working really, really hard on this big project that my sister has been putting together. I just felt overwhelmed by how rad she is, and I cried.
So you're an easy cry. Your crying flows.
Oh, my sweet. Cry is the go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one or the other. And I cry all my emotions. I also cry frustration. I cry anger. I cry all of them. It comes through my eyeballs. I feel a lot of things and they just come out of my eyes.
Yeah, I have that too. It has fully regulated me, I feel like, and crying just regulates me.
Yeah, same. There's been times where I've just been like, no, trying to shut it off because it doesn't feel like the right place or the appropriate place for it. But also, I'll tell you this very quick story because I think this kind of illustrates the point that I want to make. Years ago, I got to be with a woman and her sister as her sister was dying. And doctors came in and out of the room and we sat and we chatted and I asked if they understood what the doctor had said. And we're doing all like the very technical work. And then we were sitting in silence for a while and I was feeling into the sister relationship. I have 3 biological sisters myself, and how sad it would be for my sister to be dying. And I did what you're not supposed to do, which is to conflate yourself with the client, right? But in that moment, it was just a big upswell of emotion. I could see the tenderness between them and like the sadness and the ache about this relationship ending in this form. And the tears came and I couldn't stop them, which is part of my fear sometimes when the tears come, is that they'll just be waterfalls. And so I was trying to get them back together. I went to the bathroom. It wasn't working out. And so got it together enough to come back out and say, hey, I think I'm going to go now and I'll be available if you need anything. Got in the car. Then my tears turned into shame for having collapsed into the container I was meant to help create. A few days later, after a few days of like beat up, for real, the sister called and told me that she was so grateful that I had cried because it was the first time that she felt like somebody else was as devastated as she was that her sister was dying, that everybody else had been like sterile or professional, I'm using air quotes around that, with the situation, but she got a human in me, like somebody whose heart was broken also. And I thought, okay, maybe this isn't something that I have to try to hide so much and feel so much shame about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say about that. Like what comes out of you, it comes out of you.
Yeah, out of my eyeballs. What can I do? It does it on its own. I'm going to cry. And then I'm probably going to laugh. And then I'm probably going to cry again. And then I'm going to eat some snacks that we can guarantee.
Is there any one situation that comes to mind in your, in your death doula-ing, any one like where you really, I don't know, what that was particularly transformative or? There
is one. I wrote about this also. It's the last story in the book. So spoiler alert if you're reading it right now, anybody. But there was a client named Miss Bobby years ago who I started visiting her when she was, I think, 93 or so. And she was in an elder care facility. Her daughters asked me to come to spend some time with her. And I got to know her. She would tell me stories, sometimes the same stories over and over and over again about her life. But these stories were wild, okay? Like she'd tell me about chasing off lovers with guns, traveling all over the place before Black people were allowed to. And she was incredible to me. I also noticed how old she was and realized when she had lived and all the things that she'd lived through in her lifetime. She was also still very fierce, even though she was in a bed like a little baby bird. She was still very fierce in her expression, and she would I'd get dressed up for her all the time because I'd walk in, she'd ask me to twirl, and she wanted to see my jewelry, and I'd let her wear it, and we had a really sweet relationship. I think after working with her for some time, while I understood my role and the time that her time would soon be ending, I was really surprised when she had a cardiac event and they called me to tell me that cry. I'm feeling emotional talking about it now, but the cry when it finally dawned on me that her life would be ending surprised me. Not only had I grown close to her, but I'd also been kind of clinging to her as an example of what life looks like when we live on our own terms, that the stories that we make of our lives are ours to share. They are ours to write, and no limitations that can be placed on us externally belong to us unless we subscribe to them. Miss Bobby did not subscribe to any of it at all.
Wow.
And I feel so much honor to have gotten to witness it, to be close to it, to hear her stories, to get close to her. Yeah, it was a tough one when she died. It was tough.
And is there fear walking into these situations? Like, you're walking into such an intimate, vulnerable moment?
Yeah.
And obviously, like the most.
There's a little bit of fear, but it shows up more in the imposter syndrome. Like, wow, this is such a big, important moment in their lives. What little old me got. But when I start to self-identify, that's ego talking. When I self-identify with what I can do in this space, it's got nothing to do with me. Rather,
right.
When I can be present for exactly who I am as I am, that's more than enough. Because not only are most people running away from it, most people wouldn't dare to be. And then next, nobody needs me to be anything more than what I am. Just my presence is enough. So that's where the fear comes in, to not know what I'm stepping into and to be doing it boldly anyway.
And was it to get to that place where you are enough and it's just you? And what is your practice to stay there?
Well, there are a lot of practices I try to undertake around the dying time, when I know somebody will soon be dying. Some of them are also built around trying to self-differentiate, because I am also highly empathic. I'll often touch the door jamb when I'm crossing into a house, when I'm crossing the threshold into a bedroom, in an effort to remind myself that I go in and I will come out changed, but the person that's going in is going to meet something she's never met before. And I've also crossed thresholds into places that I haven't known before 1,000,000 times, and I've been just fine. I think that also the doula practice humbles you in a way, that death is huge. And I actually hope to feel small in comparison to it, but not like that I am small, but rather that this is a massive, massive event. And being invited as a guest into that space emboldens me. Like, fuck yeah, I got everything. I get to be invited into this most intimate, sacred, and vulnerable space. Wow. Lucky me. So I do my best to walk in with head high and soft front and strong back, and prepared to receive also the gift of being present for somebody's dying. Because it's a gift.
It's the ultimate expression of love.
Yeah, truly. In the doula training course that we run, the first question I ask is, what does love look like in the face of death? Because we think of it as, just despair, and we don't think of it as health. We don't think of it as healing. We don't think any of that is available. We think just sadness and awful and terrible. Yet sometimes the door opens and a human being becomes a way for grace to move through. That's Rumi, that's not me. And so I think of it often that way, that sometimes the door opens in the space of dying and the human being becomes a way for grace, for love to move through.
And maybe even joy and happiness sometimes? Or
Sometimes laughter, always beauty. Yeah.
Wow. And what does self-acceptance mean to you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it means a lot of forgiveness and grace. It means allowing me to be me, to allow myself to be human, to recognize that I'll die, to allow myself to, have some squishy bits around my midsection, and to allow just to be with this wonderful, strange ride that I'm on for what it is. It's bizarre, The fact that there's trillions of functions currently happening in this body that I have no awareness of or control over, that allow me to engage in the world and drink water and eat food and look my lover in the eye, that is a miracle. It's massive. Now, who am I to question how any of it is going down when the utter perfection exists inside of me at this moment? It exists in my fingernail. Like, girl, what are you tripping out over?
I was thinking about the exact same thing this morning, literally. It's the most expansive thought. You just, if we all can get there, then I have hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have hope?
I do have hope. Hope can be dangerous sometimes, but I have hope. I feel inspired. I've been noticing how quickly we Western culture seem to be shifting in our relationship toward death. And as I was explaining earlier, I really believe that it is the thing that can help cure a lot of these societal ills, or at least allow us to approach them with a lot more grace. And that shift seems to be occurring. While other things in the world may tell me it's not, I still believe that there are things that are shifting and we're moving closer. I
agree.
Yeah, I still have hope.
I agree completely. I think we're actually in the great moment of healing, even though it looks so the opposite. But one of the people that I listen a lot to, Caroline Myss, says that we're in the greatest transformation of all of human history, moving from the love of power to the power of love.
Beautiful.
And how, of course, what could you expect if the entire dark ages that we've been living in is crumbling?
Yeah.
What do you expect? That we're just going to kind of like dance? It's just going to be like a cakewalk?
It's a death. It's the death that's occurring. And gratefully, there are also doulas that are thinking of it that way, you know, because when we talk about death doulas, yes, I'm often talking about the body, but there are also doulas that doula people that are getting divorced because there's a death there, and abortions because there's a death there, and the climate because there's a death there, and the civilization, there's a death there, the patriarchy, hopefully there's a death there. Like, if we can honor it, be with it, see it as such, and then treat it as such, I think that allows us a little bit more balm as we move through the process, you know?
It does that, and it also, instead of perpetuating the same violence and blame and shame and all the cycles of violence, we can't lift out of this until we're able to really trust and believe in the bigger, that it starts at home, it starts within.
Yeah. And we accept ourselves, which is also part of our power. I allow myself to be. Yeah, it does start at home.
It's so key. It's so key, because when you don't do that, then you create war.
Yeah. Bombs. Literal bombs.
Literally. It's coming from self-hatred. It's coming from misery.
Yeah.
And
the denial of our death.
And so, last question, what would you tell your younger self? What would you tell her not to change about herself?
Well, I would tell her to cut her hair earlier, for starters. Just cut it off. I hated doing it. Just cut it off. It's so much more freeing.
What do you mean you hated doing it?
Black women, I think, are known for having just a variety of hairstyles that look all these big, beautiful ways, and we can do so much stuff with our hair. I do not have that skill, that gift, or that interest. And so I was constantly trying with flat irons and curling irons and hot combs and the perms and ponytails and all the rest. And I didn't like it, but I did it because I felt like I had to. So now I would say get rid of it quickly so that you stop stressing yourself out about your hair and not looking the way that you think that you should look. I would also, I would just tell her that we're going to be okay. We end up doing okay, that the self-judgment and the fear of not stacking up won't last long. I felt like an outsider for so long, but we will eventually get to a place that we belong. And that actually has to come from within first. I have to start feeling like I belong to and with myself first. Oh, and I'd say, just hold on, because you get the really hot, loving, present man. Stop with these fuckboys. And also, you don't have to wear a short skirt and a high heel into a club if you don't want to, because they will take you in your period panties and your old stinky pants, okay? That's also what I would tell her.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I dream about is just what if we were all told from the minute we were born to not change anything about ourselves? Almost the flip side of what you're doing.
Yeah. Totally. I would tell her just keep going. Don't change a thing. Just keep this up. And we're going to end up at a place that's going to feel really, really good one day.
Right.
Yeah.
With all the messiness, with all the mistakes, with all the wrong turns.
And the fried out hair. We're going to get there. I think my deathbed self would probably say something similar to me right now also. I think my deathbed self would also say, you're doing great. Just keep going in this direction, honey.
There are no wrong turns, and there's no avoiding the messy, the windy road.
Yeah, that's all perfect. As difficult as
You
it is.
can't avoid it.
Yeah, as difficult as it is, it's all perfect. It's hard. And there's such privilege in being able to look at it that way and feel like I know it. But I do, and I'm grateful for it. And like folks with privilege do, I'm going to do my best to exercise it in the direction of what is good and just.
Exactly. We have that privilege, and it's on us to do it as much as we can so that we can help others.
Yeah.
It starts here.